We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, this is Marlon Detweiler with Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Today we have with us someone who has become a dear friend of mine through our involvement in classical education, Gene Edward Veith. Gene, welcome.
Good to be with you, Marlon.
Gene, we have known each other for goodness, more than 20 years, but tell us, for the sake of our audience, a little bit of your background and what you did as a career. I know that you're retired now, but I know that doesn't mean you're completely inactive too. So maybe what you're up to now as well.
Okay, well, I'm an English professor, taught in Christian schools for a long time, and I have been interested in the connection between Christianity and literature. That got me into writing about Christianity and the arts. That got me into writing about Christianity and culture. So that got me into all kinds of things, including education, as I'm sure we'll talk about. So I taught at Concordia University, Wisconsin, for most of my career. Then I wrote for World Magazine full-time as a cultural editor. And then I took a position at Patrick Henry College, and not only as an English professor, but I was the provost, and we had a really good classical true core curriculum at Patrick Henry. And so I was there for almost 10 years, and a few years ago I retired, and so now I'm back in Oklahoma, where I grew up originally, and close to some grandchildren, live in the same town, and I am keeping really busy, and now I have time to write and do other things that I really didn't have time to do when I was busy earning a living. So that's where I am now.
Well, my experience with you is that writing is exactly what you do best. What are you writing now?
Well, I'm kind of between big projects. I've got a lot of articles and things I'm supposed to be working on, doing my blog, and that's I'm devoting more and more time to that, the Chronok blog. What I'm doing now, I was involved with a big project, a translation of the London writings by Johann Hamann, who is a Christian thinker that's been rediscovered by philosophers and other people writing back in the 1700s is the greatest critic of the Enlightenment and the rationalism that
Interesting.
heard. And Hamann turned out as a very strong evangelical Christian, and a lot of what he was doing was just applying Christianity on a very high level, the Word of God, centrality of Christ, in a very unique, fresh kind of way. Anyway, most of his writings aren't translated, but I've been working with John Kleinig, the Australian theologian, on an English translation of the work where Hamann talks about his conversion, and you see a lot of his basic Christian ideas, the London writing. The book has come out. I'm the editor. There's still a lot to do getting out the Kindle version, and I'm trying to shepherd that through, which is a big pain, I'm discovering, but that'll be out also before too long.
That's wonderful. Well, you have been a key person in the resurgence and recent interest in classical Christian education. Give us a sense of how that came about for you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate those words. I've been interested in the liberal arts kind of on the collegiate side for a long time, and which is not the same as what is coming out in our school so much. There's so much more to it than I realize. But I had put together an integrated humanities program for our adult learning program at Concordia, Wisconsin. And so we had a class on the ancient Greeks. And so we were studying all these good things and classical Middle Ages and so on. But my first class, you always go around having the people in the class introduce themselves, say why they're taking the course. And one of the students said he's taking this course because he wants to start a classical school.
Oh,
And I
really?
thought,
I heard this story
okay,
before.
right. Again, knowing nothing about this and thinking that was highly unlikely. But then I had him a year later in another one of these courses, and he said he had started a classical Christian school, and it was Andrew Kern.
Oh my goodness.
He told me about the school he started in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where a lot of the Green Bay Packers were sending their kids.
Uh-huh.
So I got interested in this, and he invited me down, and I went to the Providence Academy in Green Bay, and I was just astonished to see the academic level of these little kids, see what they knew and what they could do. So that got me interested, and I did more research and learned more about it. And Andrew helped me with that. And I wrote an article about this for the Capital Research Center, which is a conservative think tank that looks for conservative alternatives to different issues. And then it was a very popular article, and Capital Research Center asked me to expand that into a monograph, into a book.
Yeah.
So I knew Andrew knew more about it than I did, so I asked if he wanted to work together on it. They gave us a grant allowing me to travel to travel different places to study some of these schools, and one of them was Geneva Classical School in Orlando, Florida, where I met you, Marlon. That was how we got to know each other. Anyway, that turned into.
I don't remember you being there on that research project.
Really?
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Okay. I was just there in the background, went to church.
I'm forgetting a lot of things these days, Dean, so I'm sorry, but that's great to be reminded of.
But this turned into a little book we did, Classical Education, published by Capital Research Center. And it just surveyed a lot of the different ways this was being carried out. And yeah, just one thing led to another. And that's how I got involved in classical Christian education.
That's really neat. Well, part of that relationship that we established turned into a couple different points of connection. I know that we had you come to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I believe that you were the keynote speaker for one of our teacher training conferences that we used to do. And you may have been there to speak at a fundraising banquet as well. I don't remember if that was the case or not. But the thing that I do remember quite well was your involvement in our integrated humanities curriculum called the Omnibus. As you may recall, we had two editors, and I functioned as the publisher, as did our business. And in the process of doing that, the first 3 books were done, and we realized we could use more hands on deck. And so the last 3 books, the books, of course, for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, or Omnibus 4, 5, and 6, were books that you were a part of editing and writing for, and played a key role. I guess a good starting point is to ask why that project interested you enough to be a part of it.
Well, has really got a lot out of being part of the Omnibus project. I mean, giving classical education to people, this is a huge thing, and it's so important, and it's getting such great results. But very few, even of the teachers, have had a classical education themselves. And also for the homeschoolers, most parents haven't had that kind of education that they want to give to their kids. And it's true that when you study the great heritage, the great heritage we have in our civilization, and the great heritage we have as Christians. It's so important to transmit this, but you need to have a guide. You need to have someone to give you the background, point out things. I think of in Dante, there's a Virgil sort of taking Dante by the hand, pointing out what he needs to look at and explaining what he's seeing. And you sort of need that to really get the heritage that we have. And the beauty of the omnibus books is that they have that. Not only does it give you the introductions and the guiding and the guidance through the great works of our civilization and of the Christian faith, but it gives lessons, assignments, things, and these two are guiding students so that they're realizing for themselves and applying for themselves what these things are all about. And so it's just a beautiful thing, and I love the production of them. The illustrations are just gorgeous, and it's just a very fine book in an age where we've kind of gotten away from books in general. So I was happy to be a part of it. I got to we would meet as the editors to say, okay, we need to cover this. Who do we know that could handle this topic, that topic? And sometimes when we couldn't think of anybody, we had to do it ourselves. And but I enjoyed writing about some of my favorites, John Milton's Paradise Lost, and Dante. I believe I wrote some on him, and even other topics like Aristotle's views of tragedy. And these are all really favorites of mine, and it gave me a chance to kind of say what I wanted to say about them, and it was just a good forum. But again, when it all came together, another thing I got from it was reading the other essays. There was one on mathematics that was one of these paradigm shifting experiences for me, pointing out that mathematics is a mental construct. It's a mental thing, and yet somehow it applies and perfectly describes the outside world. How could that be? And I realized that the reason is that because there's a mind behind the objective universe.
Yeah.
And we know who that is. And it isn't just that one thing or another shows intelligent design or creation or whatever, but everything does. Mathematics does.
Yeah.
And again, that was so paradigm shifting for me. But I mean, you have that kind of thing just in the omnibus series for everybody.
What you're referring to there for our audience is that we included in books 4, 5, and 6, the books intended for 10th through 12th grade students, I think 26, is either 24 or 26 essays on various topics or career paths, right, as a way of helping students shape their thinking about where they might go career-wise. And they were all written from a biblical worldview. We took the initiative, you may have seen it, to assemble them into a single volume also that we actually give away called Vocatio. And we give it away, I think, by going to our website. And if you just sit there and park, you'll get a pop-up which will allow you to select getting a free copy of it by giving us your email address. So just a sense of how that's given away also. Candidly, I'm a little disappointed sometimes that there hasn't been more traction or more interest in those things, because I thought they would be of immense value. And maybe they are, and I just haven't heard, but I'm really glad to hear that a literature guy loved the math one.
Well, that's right. And that's one of the things I learned from classical education in general, that everything links together with everything else.
Yeah.
The kind of progressive education that has dominated the public schools and everything else is highly specialized. You know a lot maybe about a little, and yeah, you need to specialize at some point for the career and so on. But to really understand it, you need to see how literature and math and history and philosophy and theology, and it all ties together. And that's the great beauty of it. And it gives you understanding in a very broad and rich way.
Yeah.
And mathematics, again, I always thought the liberal arts just meant humanities, but whereas the trivium is about language, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, are all about mathematics.
Yeah.
Mathematics plays out. And so
Interesting.
mathematics, when people say, oh, you don't study the liberal arts, we just need STEM courses. Well, science, technology, those emerge out of classical education too.
They do. A lot of people don't realize that. It's a very good thing to emphasize.
Yeah, I don't know if they can be sustained even as things are going in our in the public schools and education theory. It's just devolved into political indoctrination. And if we're even going to have scientists and mathematicians and technologists, they too need a classical education.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I want to refer to an instance. I don't know if you'll remember it, but it had me laughing out loud. You were, I believe, editing someone's work on a Shakespeare piece, and your comment was, no, 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 indicating that they had missed the point of something. Do you remember that? Can you relate what happened
I
there?
don't.
Oh, I wish you remember the details.
I've made comments like that. I graded so many papers over the course of my long career that they kind of run together. And the editing, I guess, is sort of
well, for our audience's sake, to at least take away some of the mystery, I don't remember which work it was, but you made the clear point that we were not, through the work that had been done on that piece, we had missed the point. And then you went on to talk about what it was, and it required some significant editing, but that was the safety and the expertise that came from you and the others that were part of the editorial team. And I think it's one of the reasons why the omnibus curriculum has been so successful in people using it. And it has so much timelessness to it. And you really helped to make sure that became what it is.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate that.
Now, other writing that you've done that has really been significant to the classical education movement is your work in the Turning Point series. You had 2 books as a part of that, I think, maybe 3. Actually, I know it was 3. I only have 2 of them listed, but I know you wrote Reading Between the Lines, State of the Arts, and Postmodern Times.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the Turning Point series and then each of those books and what you were trying to accomplish with them.
Well, the purpose of it, Crossway, and they'd gotten a grant also to put together some series of books relating different fields to the Christian faith and Christian worldview. And I had written one. Well, they asked me to write the one about literature. I had done some other writing, kind of doing that a little bit, but this let me address Reading Between the Lines.
Reading Between the Lines is the one you're referring to about literature.
Yes, yes, and that was a Christian guide to literature. And then I had earlier written a little book for InterVarsity called State of the Arts about a biblical perspective on art. And Crossway asked me to do that, to do one on art. And no, I proposed that because I had written that one about it and it had gone out of print.
Okay.
But I expanded it into State of the Arts from Bezaleel to Mapplethorpe.
Yep.
So that was one. And then finally they were coming to the end of that series and wanted one more to finish it off. And there was something at the time, a phenomenon happening in the culture and the academic world and the arts world, postmodernism. And now that's fairly well known, but at the time, I think mine was one of the first ones to really approach it from a Christian perspective. There were Christians writing books thinking they could be postmodern and didn't really see the problems with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wrote Postmodern Times, and that was a Christian Guide to Contemporary Thought and Culture. Applying that to Omnibus, I was shocked and amazed, thrilled, but sort of appalled that Postmodern Times was studied in the Omnibus program.
It is. Yeah, I think it's Omnibus 3.
Book.
Yeah.
To think that the book I did is a great book up there with Milton and Shakespeare and the others was kind of confusing to me. I think it's a good book, maybe even a pretty good book. I don't know if it's a great book, but I'm happy to be included in that company by far.
Well, it was certainly a book and remains a book that has the impact that it needs to help shape student thinking in today's culture about the great books. And so I do understand your comment, and time will tell if 500 years from now, people are reading Gene Edward Veith on Postmodern Times. But it was an important and remains an important work, as far as I'm concerned, in helping students understand why we're where we are.
Well, that makes me feel really good. I appreciate that. Hopefully, if we last 500 years, postmodernism will be dead and gone, and only historians like me would like to study the folly of the time back in the 21st century.
Yeah. I want to make a note about one of the other books too. State of the Arts was, in fact, I'll make State of the Arts in particular. When I read that first, it was the first time that I'd been confronted with a very effective argument, one that moved me to agree that we can have a sense of art being good and bad, and even that is, it's really not art, non-art, in an absolute sense.
Yeah.
And that was a new way of thinking about art, and it's proven to be so important in how we think about aesthetics. After all, if God made something and it was good, we can understand that if something it was made by a human, it might be inferior to something that God made. We have a sense of which things can be aesthetically better and worse, relatively speaking, and be able to put that in some real objective and concrete terms was very helpful in an area that tends to be thought of even by Christians, and maybe particularly by Christians, in subjective terms. What have you learned from that time to today about that kind of evaluative process and understanding?
Well, postmodernism is relativism, to say it in a word. And in classical terms, we talk about the true, the good, and the beautiful. And the postmodernists say that truth is relative. And of course, Christians said, no, it's not, it's absolute, rightly. Postmodernists say that the good is relative. And Christians say, no, moral absolutes, and quite rightly. But I never understood how that Christians even tend to agree with postmoderns when it comes to beauty. The beauty is relative. And so in thinking like that's actually a kind of a open door that can lead to the other kinds of relativism.
Yeah, that's right.
And beauty and aesthetics is often, today especially, a real battleground for accepting what's good and what's true also. So Christians shouldn't be relativists of any kind, including when it comes to beauty.
Can you give us some principles of beauty being beautiful?
Well, there are certain kind of universal traits. For example, there's the issue of unity and complexity, and
Okay.
bringing those
Yep.
together.
Yep.
So some works are very simple. They have unity. Okay, a black canvas. Okay, that has unity, but it doesn't have complexity.
Yeah.
You have another modern art, the random paint splashings of abstract expressionism. Well, that has complexity, but no unity. The greatest works have both. And when you look at a great classic painting, and by the way, art does not just refer to painting, and it refers to music and to
Right. Of course.
literature and the rest. The great one have a unity. It fits together, and yet when you look at it closely, there are all these elements going on, and they all contribute to the whole. And so great music is like that. You take a piece by Bach, it has this great impression, magnificent impression, and yet there's so many things going on, and so it can occupy you in ways that, you know, a simple pop song with 3 chords just doesn't do. It just doesn't compare. And that's one. Another category is the sublime. The sublime is something that's so great it just takes your breath away. Burke and others wrote about sublime. This is what's awe-inspiring. You know, you look at, you know, the Grand Canyon. That's sublime. You just blows you away. And there's art that's like that too, and literature like Milton's Paradise Lost, or paintings like the Sistine Chapel, things that just knock you out. And that's, we use awesome as a term for something really good. Oh, that's an awesome hamburger. Well, we see we've lost that whole category of magnificence and greatness, and that's a shame. But again, you have that in the classical approach to art, literature, music, and aesthetics in general.
I know that I put you on the spot there, and you answered well. Those are some really great principles for us to take and apply as we think in terms of art being and art or aesthetic elements having a real sense of greatness. That there.
Yeah. Let me give you one more example. Let me give you one more example if we have time. Sure. The great writer about sublimity was a Greco-Roman writer named Longinus, back a few decades before Christ, and he said he was explaining all this, how it works, and he said, you know, the most sublime passage of literature can be found in the Hebrew Bible, and he's not a Christian. He said it begins, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so he analyzes that. It says the language is so simple, and yet it's conveying the most incredible, awe-inspiring possibility to go from darkness to light. And it does so in such a simple way. And anyway, he went on to analyze that. And of course, the creation of the universe, that is sublime, and nothing beyond that. But it was so great that a classical aesthetic thinker, not a Christian, would recognize that and point out to ourselves.
That is awesome. We have we're running out of time, but there's one question I have to ask you. I'll ask you to be brief, but I've got to hear you answer this. What are your hopes now for classical Christian education?
Well, as I see contemporary education just falling apart, classical education is the one area in the culture wars that Christians are actually winning. Lost on same-sex marriage, we're losing on abortion, all these other things. But in education, this is where Christians have the advantage. And when Christians and our Christian young people become the best educated at the very time that the non-Christians are descending into just ignorance and barbarism and knowing nothing, really, who's going to have the advantage?
Yeah,
Who's going to be the culture makers?
we're creating some leaders.
You really are. And to have an educated people, the educated people are always the ones that lead the culture and the society and the business and everything else. And everybody, you and listeners and homeschool parents, and I think sometimes maybe they don't realize the significance of what they're achieving. And when Christians are
Hard to when you're in the middle of it, isn't it?
That's right, it is. It really is.
Yeah.
They're going to be giving Christianity a chance to influence the culture like we had been doing for centuries and centuries and centuries, and we can do that again.
Absolutely. Today we've had Gene Edward Veith with us. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Thank you again, Gene.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.